In the jungles of Turkey lies a temple complex built 12,000 years ago, 7,000 years before the pyramids. No one can explain who built it, because according to every textbook, humans at that time were illiterate hunter-gatherers who hadn't even invented pottery. Off the coast of Italy, Roman harbors have been sitting underwater for 2 millennia, and instead of crumbling, the concrete is getting stronger every year. In a museum in London sits a 3,000-year-old crystal lens ground with a precision that implies the Assyrians understood optics centuries before the Greeks wrote a single word about light. These objects don't fit the timeline, because the timeline was written by people who never held them. Today we'll break down 7 real ancient artifacts, each one looking like it was left behind by travelers from the future. And we'll start with the oldest one. By a margin of several thousand years, all 7 can be touched with human hands. Each one sits in a real museum or a real archaeological site, and each one cracks the familiar picture of the past. If you're feeling like the usual channels tell history too flatly, subscribe. Here we dig where the textbooks end. 1. Göbekli Tepe. The Temple Before Civilization, Southeastern Turkey, 1994. A German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt was surveying a hilltop that local farmers had been plowing around for generations. They called it Potbelly Hill. Beneath less than half a meter of soil, Schmidt's team uncovered something that rewrote human history overnight. Massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some standing 5.5 meters tall and weighing up to 10 tons, carved into them foxes, lions, scorpions, vultures, snakes, rendered in high relief with an artistic sophistication that shouldn't exist at that date. Radiocarbon dating placed the site at approximately 9,600 BC. That's 12,000 years ago. For context, the Great Pyramid of Giza wouldn't be built for another 7,000 years. According to conventional archaeology, humans at this time lived in small nomadic bands. No agriculture, no permanent settlements, no written language, no metal tools. And yet someone organized hundreds of workers, quarried multi-ton limestone pillars from bedrock 100 meters away, transported them uphill, and arranged them in precise circles with astronomical alignments. The pillars were carved using flint tools, the only technology available. Try carving a 10-ton block of limestone into a perfectly symmetrical T-shape with detailed animal reliefs using nothing but sharpened rocks. Engineers who've examined the site estimate each pillar required months of continuous labor by a specialized team. But here's the part that keeps archaeologists awake at night. Around 8,000 BC, somebody deliberately buried the entire complex. They filled every enclosure with rubble and soil, carefully and methodically, as if they were sealing it away on purpose, not destroyed, preserved, hidden for 10,000 years until a German professor walked across a plowed field in 1994. Göbekli Tepe didn't just push back the date of monumental architecture, it inverted cause and effect. The textbook said agriculture created civilization, which created religion, which created temples. Göbekli Tepe says the temple came first. Belief built the city, not the other way around. What do you think? Why would anyone bury a masterpiece on purpose? Write your theory in the comments. 2. Roman marine concrete. The material that heals itself. Drive along the Italian coast near Pozzuoli, and you'll see ancient Roman harbor walls jutting out of the Mediterranean. They've been submerged in corrosive salt water for over 2,000 years. Modern concrete structures in the ocean start cracking within decades. Portland cement, the foundation of everything we build today, has a lifespan of maybe 50 to 100 years in marine environments before it begins to disintegrate. Roman concrete is getting stronger. Pliny the Elder described the recipe in the 1st century AD. Volcanic ash from the area around Pozzuoli, the Romans called it pulvis puteolanus, lime, and seawater. That's it. They mixed volcanic ash with lime and threw in the one ingredient every modern engineer would consider a contaminant: salt water. For centuries, scientists assumed Roman concrete survived despite the seawater. In 2017, a team led by geologist Marie Jackson at the University of Utah drilled cores from Roman breakwaters and put them under X-ray microdiffraction at the Berkeley synchrotron. What they found was stunning. Seawater wasn't destroying the concrete, it was improving it. As ocean water seeped through microcracks, it reacted with the volcanic ash to grow interlocking crystals of aluminous tobermorite and phillipsite, minerals that filled the cracks and actually reinforced the structure. The concrete was self-healing on a molecular level. Modern Portland cement is designed to be chemically inert. It resists water. Roman concrete embraced water and used it as a building material. Two fundamentally opposite engineering philosophies, and the ancient one wins by 2 millennia. The Romans poured this concrete into wooden forms, sank them into the sea, and walked away. The ocean did the rest. We've spent 200 years trying to make concrete that survives the sea. The Romans made concrete that uses the sea as a co-builder, and we still can't reproduce it at industrial scale because the specific volcanic ash they used and the exact mineral chemistry it triggers has no modern equivalent that works the same way.
Steady, men.
Yes, sir.
We are uncovering something
3.
magnificent.
The Nimrud Lens.
Clear the dust from the face.
Optics. Before optics. In 1853, the legendary archaeologist Austin Henry Layard was excavating the ruins of the Assyrian palace of Nimrud in modern-day Iraq. Among the rubble of a room that had been burned when the city fell in 612 BC, he found a small disk of rock crystal. Oval, about 4 centimeters across, with a flat side and a convex side, it looked like a magnifying glass, because it is a magnifying glass. The Nimrud lens, now in the British Museum, is ground to a focal length of approximately 12 centimeters. It magnifies objects about 3 times. The surface shows 12 concentric grinding marks, indicating it was shaped on a turning lathe, a tool the Assyrians possessed but that no one imagined they used for optical work. Italian physicist Giovanni Pettinato proposed that the Assyrians used lenses like this one as components of primitive telescopes. His evidence: Assyrian astronomical texts describe the planet Saturn as a god surrounded by a ring of serpents. Saturn's rings are invisible to the naked eye. The earliest European telescope wouldn't appear until 1608, over 2,200 years later. Skeptics argue the lens was merely decorative or used for fire starting. But microscopic analysis of Assyrian cylinder seals, tiny carved stone cylinders used as signatures, reveals details so fine that modern scholars struggle to see them without magnification. Somebody was carving details invisible to the naked eye, which means somebody was seeing at magnification. The mathematical precision of the lens curvature isn't accidental. It follows optical principles that wouldn't be formally described until Euclid's Optica in the 3rd century BC. 3 centuries after the Nimrud lens was already in use, a 3,000-year-old magnifying glass carved from rock crystal, in a civilization that left behind astronomical observations impossible without it. And it sits quietly in a British Museum display case labeled Ornament. Desir 4. Damascus Steel. The nanowire blades. From the 3rd century to the 17th century, swordsmiths in the Middle East produced a steel so legendary that crusaders brought stories of it back to Europe as though they'd seen magic. Damascus steel blades could slice through a falling silk scarf. They could cut through European swords and still hold their edge. The surface shimmered with distinctive wavy patterns called the Mohammed's Ladder, or water pattern, flowing lines that looked like liquid metal frozen midstream. The last known Damascus steel blade was forged around 1750. After that, the recipe vanished. Swordsmiths tried for centuries to recreate it. All failed. In 2006, a team led by materials scientist Peter Poffler at the Technical University of Dresden examined genuine Damascus steel blades under an electron microscope. What they found inside the metal defied everything known about pre-industrial metallurgy. The steel contained carbon nanotubes, cylindrical structures of carbon atoms just nanometers in diameter, the same structures that modern scientists consider cutting-edge nanotechnology. The nanotubes were wrapped around cementite nanowires, iron carbide filaments thinner than a human blood cell. This nanostructure is what gave Damascus Steel its extraordinary properties. The cementite provided hardness, the surrounding softer iron provided flexibility, and the nanotubes reinforced the entire matrix at the atomic level. How did medieval smiths create nanostructures? The answer lies in the raw material. Damascus blades were forged from Wootz steel ingots imported from India and Sri Lanka. The ore in those specific mines contained trace impurities: vanadium, molybdenum, chromium, manganese, in precise concentrations that during the repeated cycles of heating and forging catalyzed the formation of carbon nanotubes. When those specific mines were depleted in the 18th century, the impurity recipe vanished. Swordsmiths continued using the same techniques, but the steel they produced was ordinary. The secret was never in the skill alone. It was in the dirt, a geological accident that lasted 1,400 years and produced the most advanced composite material in the pre-industrial world. Modern metallurgists can now produce similar nanostructures in laboratories, but they need electron microscopes, spectrometers, and computer-controlled furnaces. Ancient smiths achieved the same result with charcoal fires, stone hammers, and an ore they chose by intuition. 5. The Nazca Lines. Drawings for the Sky Southern Peru, 1930. A Peruvian archaeologist named Toribio Mejia Gespe was hiking across the Nazca Desert when he noticed something odd about the terrain. Shallow grooves in the ground seemed to form patterns. But on foot, all he could see were meaningless scratches in the reddish pebbles. The true scale became clear only when commercial airlines began flying over the area. From the air, the desert floor exploded into a gallery of colossal art. A hummingbird 93 meters long, a spider 46 meters across, a monkey with a spiraling tail stretching 135 meters, a condor with a 130-meter wingspan, geometric shapes, perfect triangles, trapezoids, spirals, some extending over 370 meters, more than 1,500 geoglyphs spread across 450 square kilometers. They were made by removing the top layer of reddish iron oxide pebbles to reveal the lighter ground beneath. Simple technique, unfathomable result. Radiocarbon dating of wooden stakes found at the ends of some lines places them between 500 BC and 500 AD, the Nazca civilization. The figures are drawn with a single continuous line that never crosses itself. The proportions are mathematically precise even at scales where a 1-degree error would be visible from altitude. German mathematician Maria Rieke dedicated her entire life, from 1946 until her death in 1998, to studying the lines. She demonstrated that the Nazca people used a system of stakes and cords to scale small drawings up to enormous sizes, maintaining proportional accuracy. But her measurements revealed something else. Many lines align with solar and stellar positions at solstice and equinox dates, forming what she called the largest astronomy book in the world. The deepest mystery isn't how they drew them. We know how. The deepest mystery is why. The drawings are only coherent from the sky. The Nazca had no aircraft, no hot air balloons, no elevated terrain nearby from which to view their work. They created masterpieces that they themselves could never fully see. Some researchers argue the lines were ritual pathways walked in procession. Others propose they mapped underground water channels in one of the driest places on Earth. In 2019, Japanese researchers using AI identified 143 previously unknown figures, including humanoid shapes with headdresses that don't match any known Nazca artistic tradition. A civilization spent centuries drawing pictures for an audience that wouldn't exist for 2,000 years, and they drew them with geometric precision that modern surveyors respect. What country are you from? Write it in the comments. Curious to know where everyone's watching from? 6. Greek fire. The weapon nobody can recreate. In 672 AD, an Arab fleet of hundreds of warships sailed toward Constantinople, capital of the Byzantine Empire. The empire was shrinking, its military weakened. By all logic, the city should have fallen. Instead, the Byzantine navy sailed out to meet them with a new weapon. Tubes mounted on the prows of ships sprayed a liquid that ignited on contact with seawater. The flames stuck to hulls, climbed rigging, burned on the surface of the water itself. Sailors who jumped overboard found that the fire followed them into the sea. The Arab fleet was annihilated. Greek fire, the Byzantines called it sea fire or liquid fire, became the empire's ultimate strategic weapon. For over 700 years, it kept Constantinople unconquerable from the sea. The formula was the most closely guarded state secret in history. Only the emperor and a single family of engineers knew the complete recipe. It was never written down in full. What we know from historical accounts: the substance was liquid, it ignited spontaneously or upon contact with water, it could not be extinguished by water, which actually intensified it. It could only be smothered by sand, strong vinegar, or old urine. It was projected through bronze siphons under pressure, essentially flamethrowers mounted on ships in the 7th century. Modern chemists have proposed dozens of formulas. Naphtha mixed with quicklime explains the water reactivity. Quicklime generates intense heat when wet. Pine resin would add adhesion, sulfur adds toxicity and smoke. Saltpeter could provide the oxidizer, but no one has combined these ingredients into a substance that matches all the historical descriptions simultaneously: self-igniting, water-intensified, sticky, projectable under pressure, and burnable on water. In 2002, chemical engineer John Halden at Princeton built a full-scale replica of the Byzantine siphon system and tested various mixtures. He achieved impressive results with pressurized naphtha, but the fire could still be extinguished with water. The water makes it worse property, the signature trait of Greek fire, remains unreproduced. When Constantinople finally fell to the Ottomans in 1453, the formula was already long lost. The last recorded use dates to the 12th century, 7 centuries of military supremacy built on a chemical recipe that died with its creators. We can land robots on Mars, but we cannot recreate a Byzantine flamethrower fuel. 7. The Piri Reis Map. The coastline nobody had seen. In 1929, a German theologian named Gustav Deissmann was cataloging old documents in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace when he found a fragment of a gazelle skin map. It was signed by Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis and dated 1513, just 21 years after Columbus's first voyage. The map showed the western coast of Africa, the eastern coast of South America, and at the bottom, what appeared to be the northern coastline of Antarctica. The continent wouldn't be officially discovered until 1820, 3 centuries later. Piri Reis himself wrote notes on the map's margins. He stated that he compiled it from about 20 older maps, including charts dating to the time of Alexander the Great and a map Columbus himself had used. These source maps are all lost. The South American coastline is drawn with remarkable accuracy for 1513. River estuaries, mountain ranges, even the Falkland Islands, which weren't charted by Europeans until 1592. But the Antarctic-like coastline at the bottom is what detonated the controversy. In 1960, Professor Charles Hapgood of Keene State College submitted the map to the U.S. Air Force Cartographic Section for analysis. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Ohlmeyer replied that the lower portion of the map appears to depict the coast of Queen Maud Land, Antarctica, under ice-free conditions. Seismic surveys of the subglacial coastline in 1949 matched the Piri Reis contours. Antarctica's coast hasn't been ice-free for approximately 6,000 years. Skeptics counter that the southern landmass is simply a distorted South American coast folded eastward, or a speculative rendering of the mythical Terra Australis that European cartographers assumed must exist. There's no consensus. But the precision of the rest of the map, the parts we can verify, suggests whoever drew the original source charts had access to geographic knowledge that far exceeded what was available in 1513. The longitude calculations are surprisingly accurate for an era when determining longitude at sea was an unsolved problem. European cartographers wouldn't achieve comparable accuracy until the chronometer was invented in the 1760s. A 16th century admiral compiled ancient maps into a single document that appears to contain geographic knowledge that predates its own era by millennia. Either the source maps contain data from a lost surveying tradition, or Piri Reis was the luckiest guesser in cartographic history. What surprised you the most today? Write it in the comments. We walked through a 12,000-year-old temple that shouldn't exist and dove into Roman harbors where concrete gets stronger with age. We held a 3,000-year-old magnifying glass and examined nanotubes inside a medieval sword. We flew over drawings made for an audience that didn't exist yet and watched the sea burn with a fire that water couldn't quench. Every one of these artifacts is documented, studied, and accessible. You don't need to take anyone's word for it, just buy a plane ticket, walk inside, and see for yourself. None of them require aliens for an explanation, but each one demands you accept an uncomfortable truth. Our ancestors possessed knowledge that we're rediscovering millennia later. We call these breakthroughs. They probably called it Tuesday. Progress isn't a straight line upward, it's a spiral, where every turn starts from the same ignorance. The real mystery isn't how they did it, it's why we forgot. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, you'll probably like the video on screen right now, so check that out, and I'll see you next time.